I'm still petrified after this encounter with my new patient. My name isn't really Derek, but I'll say it is for the purpose of this story. I work at a psychiatric hospital called Serene Hills. Lately, I feel more like a patient than a worker. But after what happened, I'm sure you'd understand. My heart is pounding right now just thinking about it, but I have to get this off my chest. First off, don't let the word serene in the name fool you. We take in many patients who are unwanted in other hospitals or too troublesome to manage. It may sound awful, but it's a grim reality in a grim world. Your strangest day is simply a Tuesday for me. But I wouldn't have it any other way. I enjoy the excitement, the challenge, and getting to know the patients. My job is to assist with patients' day-to-day activities, as well as keeping the patients calm and cooperative. Being persuasive really helps, and you may think that's counterintuitive for my line of work. But if you know your patients, it's not hard. I'm not a big guy, so I tend to employ more brain than brawn. I can't say the same for some of my coworkers, especially Brolin. He's the best example of how to wrestle any problem into submission, but it was ultimately his ruin. On the day of the incident, we had this new patient admitted. It wasn't very hard to guess that he was nervous. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were wild, and he had frayed brown hair stuck out in all directions. One weird trait I noticed was how bushy his eyebrows were, and I even referred to him as such. I'm not exactly sure what it was about him, but I felt there was something more going on. Despite my wariness, I thought of him as a delicate deer that shouldn't be spooked. He was admittedly quiet for a while, but I continued to keep a close eye on him. Think he's nervous enough? Brolin scoffed as the new patient passed us in the hall. Oh, you mean eyebrows there? Yeah, no kidding. Looks like he's on the brink of an episode. Eyebrows. Haha, I like that. For a while I didn't think you had a sense of humor. I've always had one. It's just a matter of whether people pick up on it. If I had to guess though, I'd say Mr. Eyebrows doesn't have much of one. It'd be hard to find much amusing about this place. Fair point. Day shift said everyone's been acting up more than usual today. Oh, it's a full moon. What? It's 'cause of the full moon. What's that got to do with anything? You haven't noticed yet? Patients always get more restless during a full moon cycle. You're jerking my leg. No jerking is necessary. Ask anyone on staff who's worked more than 6 months. They'll tell you. There's always something weird going on during full moons. You know the word lunar for moon and lunatic are related? No way. Go look it up. Some say it's due to a gravitational pull that brings on strange anomalies or something. Anoma what? You're so typical. Brolin, what's that supposed to mean? Doesn't matter. Hey. It looks like the soup's headed this way. Let's look orderly so he doesn't bust our chops. So the start of our shift continued toward the evening, and it didn't take long to notice the truth of the full moon phenomenon. Patients were less cooperative than usual and more resistant to taking their medication, among other things. As I promised myself, I consistently kept an eye on our newbie. He was just nervous at first, but he seemed to slowly descend into madness the further into the day it got. My inquisitiveness about our new patient got to me, so I swung by the records office and asked to take a look at his file. Turns out they had good reason for Eyebrows being here. His name was Dimitri Burrows, and there was a police report attached. Apparently, he was still in the process of being convicted for multiple murders. They found the dismembered bodies of his family strewn about his home. A neighbor showed up after hearing noises and found Dimitri crying and holding the remains of his family. The neighbor immediately called the police. They locked Dimitri up on the assumption that he was the killer. It was understandable with Dimitri's DNA all over the bodies. But then again, they were his family. He managed to escape jail, killing some people that got in his way by the same method of dismemberment. No one witnessed exactly how he got out. After his escape, he was eventually apprehended. While back in custody, he was diagnosed after speaking to multiple psychologists. This diagnosis got him admitted to a psychiatric hospital until his trial was over. He escaped the other hospital multiple times without any casualties, and thus led him here. Dmitri always maintained that he blacked out and could never remember killing anyone. He was remorseful, which was unusual for someone who completely lost touch with reality. Perhaps there was more to this guy. After further psychiatric interviews, it was determined that Dmitri had a delusion about something possessing him anytime he killed. He even said that there may be more victims because he had these blackouts many times before. No one could prove that he willfully killed anyone, and there were never any witnesses that survived anyway. What a strange case. Something about it didn't add up, but what made sense in a world that was just as mad? I went about my routine with a tingling sensation in my bones, as if my body knew something my mind didn't. Later in the evening, Dmitri was mumbling to himself pretty loud and constantly looking out the windows. Scared of the dark? Eyebrows? Hey, what's he saying? My muscled cohort directed this at me. I dunno, Brolin. He's probably not saying much of anything, so leave him alone. His name's Dmitri. He's bothering me. I don't like it when I can't understand what someone's saying. Hey, what are you mumbling about? Brolin enunciated his words to Dmitri as if talking to someone who was slow. Usually, Brolin just makes snide comments at everything and doesn't zero any patients out. Why he had such an interest in Dmitri was beyond me. I got up and walked over to supervise Brolin. Time. What's the time? The patient mumbled out. Dmitri turned to me with wide, feral eyes. Despite how it sounded on the surface, it didn't seem like odd ramblings to me. There was an earnest understanding in his eyes. It's 8:15. You'll be going to bed soon. No. I need to stay out here. I want to look out the windows. I like to see the night sky. It's so pretty out. Can I please just? No can do. Eyebrows. Lights out is at 8:30. Brolin interjected. Please. Can I? Will you let me? Dmitri turned back to me with pleading eyes, and I honestly felt bad for him. I'm sorry, bud. I don't make the rules. And Brolin's right. We have to get everyone in by 8:30. I can't. He stormed off and began rambling incoherently again. I followed lightly behind him, still maintaining a strong urge to stay diligent in watching him. 15 minutes later, we had all the patients rounded up and in their beds, to the chagrin of some. The worst of which was Dmitri, who was still rambling loudly in his room with no sign of letting up. I can't. I need to be out there, he pleaded, but we insisted he stay in his room. 10 minutes later, his filibuster was getting even worse. I can't take it. He's going to solitary, Brolin yelled. He threw down his magazine in annoyance, nostrils flaring in excellent fashion. I didn't find it necessary yet, but he was keeping his roommate and other patients up. Now, when we first took him out of his room, he was somewhat compliant at first, until Brolin started going into him. You need to shut up. You're going to solitary, and there are no windows there. That's what you get for not listening. Dude, cut it out. I whispered to my coworker. That's not helping anything. I can't. I need to look out the window. Oh, Brolin, you forgot to tell him, I said, putting on my most convincing cadence. Tell him what? That they put a window in the solitary cell. Brolin looked at me blankly, and I leaned in with a slight nod. As clueless as Brolin was, he could at least understand some subtleties. Oh, you're right. I can't believe I forgot. They just put that window in this week. Must have slipped my mind. Really? It's actually a great view. You'll love it. We only hoped that he didn't catch on, at least not until it was too late. It seemed a ridiculous ploy, but staying on the patient's good side means that they'll want to believe you. I never enjoyed lying to patients, but when it comes to keeping everyone safe and copacetic, you have to do what's necessary. Minutes later, we were at the padded cell where our new patient would spend his night. While not as manic as before, he was still very much on edge. Just as he got his foot into the door, he could tell that we'd lied to him about the window. No, he screamed. He fought against us to get out, and while Dmitri was a lanky fellow, he definitely had some scrap in him. If he was always this strong, It could explain how he managed to escape before. Even as beefy as Brolin was, it took the two of us to wedge our patient through the door. Even then, it wasn't without incident. I had some minor scratches and scrapes, but Brolin had a bright red mark on his cheek where Dimitri landed a decent blow. Brolin touched his hand to the spot and grimaced a bit. "Ouch," I said. "It's nothing." The coldness in Brolin's voice startled me. He was thoroughly pissed. "We'll let the nurse take a look at that. Come on," Brolin replied with silence as I walked on and soon felt the absence of my fellow orderly. He didn't just fall behind. Brolin hadn't moved an inch. "Brolin, you coming or what?" "Nah, I'm good. I'm gonna hang out here for a sec." "Why?" Brolin picked up on the suspicion tone in my voice and shot me a dark look that bothered me. Something in his eyes was beginning to raise some major red flags. Brolin left the keys inserted in the cell door, and I knew it was no coincidence. "Get me out of here." I started walking back to the cell to hopefully de-escalate the situation. "Please, let me out. It's for the best. I think our new patient needs to learn some manners," Brolin added. He banged on the solitary door with his fist. "Maybe I can shut you up for a good while." "Man, come on. Don't make this. Stay out of this. It's between me and Eyebrows here. He needs to understand how things work around here. Stand by so you can open the door for me when I'm done." "Hey, don't." Before I could get another word in, Brolin cracked open the door and threw the keys at me. As I caught the keys, Brolin had wriggled through the opening before yanking the door shut behind him. I approached the barred opening to the cell just as the room turned a shade of blue. Brolin had engaged his stun gun on Dimitri, who fell to the floor. "That'll teach you to mess with me." Brolin spat the words at the patient. Dimitri attempted to stand up, but not before Brolin tackled him to the floor. My blood began to boil. Not only was Brolin getting way out of line, he'd forced me to witness his atrocity. "What the hell are you doing? Get out of there!" I screamed. The door locked behind him automatically, so I had no choice but to stay so I could open it for his safety. There was no way I could leave him locked in there with a patient, but I wasn't entirely sure I could stop him without getting hurt myself. "Brolin, stop!" I shouted again through the windowed bars, but the assault had already begun. Knowing Brolin for the last 2 years, I'd only seen him snap one other time, and it was nothing close to this. He was basically holding the guy down and wailing on him. "Get off him. Hey, Hey," I shouted. Brolin didn't respond, so I had no choice but to radio for help. Never in my life did I ever think I'd have to call for help because of a coworker instead of an inmate. Right after I got a confirmation for backup, it dawned on me that we were the furthest from the station, which meant our backup wouldn't get here before Brolin took this any further. I wasn't a snitch, but this was a huge breach of safety protocol and morality. I needed help to stop Brolin, or at the very least, another witness to cover my ass. "Hey, what the?" Brolin called out. "What's wrong?" "I dunno. He's convulsing. Probably because you tossed him and beat the shit out of him, you muscle-headed asshole. Get out of there before this gets any worse." Through the bars, I could only tell that Brolin released the patient and there was some thrashing around. And that was when I heard a deep growl from the room. "Is he growling?" I asked. "Yeah. Do people normally do that if they're seizing?" "I don't know, but you need to get your ass out of there now. I want to see what happens." "What the hell is wrong with you? Get out." Through the barred slot in the door, I couldn't see the patient clear enough to discern what was happening, but I got that weird tingling sensation that something otherworldly was afoot. I wanted to check on Dimitri, but I also knew he was dangerous, and this situation could easily set him off. Brolin began to backstep towards the door when Dimitri sprung up and lunged forward so fast that it was all one blurry motion. I recoiled at the loud bang against the metal door. Something hit it so hard The door actually bent outwards. "Brolin?" I said, my voice shaking. I heard labored coughing and wheezing from the other side. It would take another minute for help to arrive, so I apprehensively inched the door open to check on Brolin. Lighting was not on my side, and I could only faintly make out the slumped form of my coworker on the other side of the door. "Oh my God," I said faintly. The idea of Brolin hitting the door that hard made me wince. I was partially surprised he was still breathing. He was going to need some serious help. I clicked on my flashlight to get a better look, but the survival part of my brain told me to locate the patient first. Dimitri was now in a fetal position in the corner, completely nude from having ripped off his own clothes. His matted hair was wilder now, until he stood up and I realized his hair wasn't just wild, it was coming out of parts of his face that weren't natural. With each lumbering step he tipped towards me, more hair sprouted from his body, and he was way more muscular than I originally thought. As I watched him, I realized that his body and muscle mass had actually tripled. A word came to mind to describe what he looked like now, but my mind wouldn't accept it. "No, they aren't real," IT tried. To W. Warren NYU, the beastly form of Dimitri spoke in a snarl. "I killed those PPOPLE, but I couldn't help it." My mind seized up despite every inclination to run away. All I could think was to not look him in the eyes. I cast my gaze to the floor, where I watched a crawling shadow of a furry figure. His speech was nothing but guttural noises, and his shadow thrashed for a moment as it grew larger to a monstrous proportion. I wanted to look up, but my mind stayed fixed on that impossible silhouette because it was less real. Still looking down, I saw Brolin being dragged into the darkness. He pleaded for mercy in wheezing breaths. From there, I only heard tearing, snapping, and Brolin's agonized screams of pain. He would not be afforded any mercy tonight. My hand shook uncontrollably, causing the light to dance about the room. I looked up in time to see a bloodied, wolfish face approach me. It no longer resembled a man's save for the bipedal stature. The beast's face was so close to mine that I could smell the hot breath and freshly chewed meat of my coworker. The yellow, canine eyes were horrifying and vexing. I dared not to move out of pure fear. Moving at an agonizingly slow pace, it sniffed me for a moment and grunted as if it savored my scent. I had to squeeze my eyes shut to stifle a scream. Then, it suddenly brushed me aside and cantered into the hallway. In shock, I watched the unnatural beast make its way through the hall and sniff about. It could have hurt me without even trying, but chose not to. One of the security guards came running in and put his brakes on when he caught sight of the creature. "Holy hell!" His words of amazement drifted away in an echo. The guard stayed put, his hand slowly reaching for his gun. The beast locked eyes with the security guard and sidestepped around him with little effort. Never taking his eyes away, the guard witnessed the wolf scamper away out of sight. Seconds later, we heard the squeal of metal followed by the shattering sound of glass in the distance. I ushered the guard over to check on Brolin. After seeing him, we knew right away he was a lost cause. In hopes to find the beast, we both ran down the hall to find a broken window with the metal bars bent completely out of shape. Something bounded away in the moonlight outside, but we couldn't say for sure. What we could confirm was hearing a long, wailing howl before it was all over. After that night, we never saw Dimitri again. Brolin was soon pronounced dead by a nurse, or what was left of him anyway. Now we had the task of explaining what happened without getting committed ourselves. I didn't bother telling anyone else what really happened, but Dimitri certainly had reason for wanting to be in the hallway near the windows. He knew that if he was close to them, he could escape while he still had control and avoid killing anyone. He was actually trying to protect us. Damn, that aspect made me wonder why Dimitri didn't tell us what was going on. But the answer was quite simple. No one would believe a sane person to be a beast of this kind, so why in the world would anyone give credence to a person labeled mentally ill? After that, I only work day shift and always take time off during full moon cycles. I even barricade myself in my home those nights in fear that my beastly patient will come back to finish what he started. Thinking back on the events, I can only surmise that he spared me for being kind to him, or maybe it was just because he had a fresh meal. Truth is, I don't rightly know, and somehow that is much worse. Even now, I'm jumping at the sound of a dog barking outside. It sounds ludicrous, but I just can't help it. Here he goes again, and again, and again. I'm not entirely sure, but I swear that sometimes I hear a familiar howling. My denial convinces me that I don't recognize it. The howling is very different from the dog. It's something more feral, primordial, even. And maybe it's just me, but every time I hear that howl, I swear it gets closer each time. But I'm sure it's just my imagination, isn't it?